Welcome to Voices of CX Season 8. As usual, bringing you the very best thought leaders, practitioners, and academics all in one place. Our goal is to make your job easier by providing you with the tools and inspiration that you need to lead through empathy, one new idea at a time. Welcome to the season finale of Voices of CX podcast season 8. This season we've had some amazing guests come on and share their views and strategies for tackling customer centricity inside of their organizations and fields. And while the whole world is beginning to wind down for the holiday season, here at Worthix, we are full steam ahead producing season 9 that's coming out next year. But before that, for this final episode, I wanted to look back at a couple highlights and compile the strongest takeaways of the season in a nice little holiday package for all our listeners and viewers. So let's kick it off with one of the core messages of this season, which is empathy. Chelsea Kim is a young executive in fintech that's helping bring a refreshing perspective, one of empathy, in what is otherwise considered a very profit-driven field. Bella, a company that she co-founded, is challenging the status quo by building a movement that injects love, beauty, and empathy into businesses.
One thing that I heard you repeat a couple times is the empathy thing. Mm-hmm. And what that tells me, I'm in a market when, we're talking about customer experience, there's a lot of empathy in customer experience. It's kind of the backbone of it. Not quite usual for fintech. Just want to say.
Definitely not.
So do you feel like this empathetic approach to everything that you've done along the course of your career is what really makes you the different voice in the room and provides you with a critical perspective that may be lacking in other people? And do you believe that may be one of the things that has brought you into so many amazing positions and so many great organizations?
I do. I think empathy is extremely important, and that sort of emotional quotient that you're able to bring to any situation. It's definitely made me more successful because I can take a step back out of myself and think about the other person. And if you're in customer support, customer experience, engagement, any of those things, you have to know who you're talking to and the right way to talk to them. And it translates across all industries. It doesn't matter if you're, working in health food or if you're in dog treats. If you don't know how to talk to the person that you're trying to either sell to, engage with, whatever it might be, you can't relate to them and you can't be progressive with them. I am very practical and tactical and logical with the operations. I mean, those processes and things that have to go in certain ways, especially in banking, regulations and compliance have to be followed. But bringing that little bit of empathy in the different way that you engage with your customer or engage with the businesses or partners that we work with, it all comes down to knowing where they are and being able to approach them in an authentic way, which is, again, comes back to the empathy.
Last episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Chris Wallace. Chris is the co-founder and president of Interview. That's a marketing consulting firm that helps companies align their brand and product stories with their customer-facing teams. Now, Interview conducts in-depth surveys with frontline employees to gain their perspectives on the pains and needs of customers along their journey with the business. Now, I love this approach as it takes advantage of the day-to-day struggles of the customer by highlighting their perspectives and the perspectives of the folks that are in the trenches. So not only does this provide the much needed insight into customers' experiences, but it also strengthens company culture and employee culture by bringing that voice of the employee into the boardroom.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Now, this focus on the human element, it doesn't seem to be so mysterious. So a lot of people struggle with this disconnect that companies have, not only with their frontline employees, but with customers. What do you think is, in all these years doing the job that you do, what have you found to be the main reason that the communication is broken?
So I think that the short answer is most organizations focus on, when you talk about communication, you talk about equipping people to deliver an experience. Mm-hmm. Experience is it's a fluid concept. It's an emotional concept, right? Customer experience is a very emotional thing. So we look at what organizations are doing, and organizations are so focused on distributing facts and information, and they're in the knowledge business. And the traditional communication has always been, we're going to give you a set of facts, whether that's through training or product sheets or ebooks or whatever, video series, whatever the case may be. So much of the focus in organizations, especially larger organizations, is here are the facts. We expect that you will take these facts, weave them together, and use them in your interactions with customers, and that you will be driven by that knowledge and driven by those facts. And we just don't think that's enough. We don't think that facts are enough. We think that organizations need to take that further step and really help turn their people into storytellers. And probably even before they're storytellers, they need to convince their own people of the story. Before you're going to retell it, you need to be convinced that it's a good story in the first place. So we look at this so much, and our approach is based on this idea of, don't tell them what to do and give them facts and tell them to regurgitate them. Sell them on the story, because if they're sold, you're going to have no problem getting them to retell what you want them to tell, or to deliver the experience that you want them to deliver, because they will feel like they're part of it and they will be passionate about it. Most organizations stop short of selling that vision and selling the ideas to their people. They just focus on distributing facts. So we see that as the biggest disconnect is, knowledge is only going to get you to one point. You need to really push to the point where people believe in the story. Then they're going to tell it day in and day out consistently.
Howard Tiersky is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance. And he came on the show this season to talk about the book and the work he does with his digital transformation agency, From. Here's Howard talking about how to get multiple departments to perceive and value customer experience practices and programs.
That's great. Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said. And we discussed it a little bit in our pre-call, where a lot of CX departments struggle transmitting the value of what they do to the people who control the budget. It's really difficult to put it in terms that they understand. And it almost feels like at time we need an interpreter to be able to translate the more emotional or perhaps human benefits into the more financial number benefits. And this happens because in the same way that customers are all different, and we have to understand customers and their unique challenges and pains and needs, we have to do the same thing internally and understand that each individual in the organization has their own set of challenges that they're dealing with, and most importantly, their own set of metrics and success indexes that they need to hit as well. So what do you think would be the number one way to translate the value of customer experience into the person who's controlling the numbers? And not like, oh, CX is a growth strategy. Yeah. But like, is there something really, really robust and tangible that you've learned throughout your decades of experience that truly makes a difference when trying to get your CX pitch across?
Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 things. So I'll just pick one. I don't know if I would say it's necessarily number one, but it's a big one, which is helping those that are in decision-making position understand how the quality of the CX is impacting sales, is impacting returns, is impacting customer word of mouth, is impacting the things that they can easily understand are driving business. Because there's a sort of a domino effect that happens with certain things in business. If you give someone a bad customer experience, one person in one instance, you could argue, like, what's the big grand, business impact of that? The truth, though, is that, if you want to drive a business result, you want to drive dollars in the cash register, you want customers to pay you money, what you're really doing is you're trying to drive a behavior. And so I would argue that, I think I mentioned this earlier, a key goal of any business is to drive customer behavior. And so then the question is, well, how do you drive that behavior? Well, people's behavior mostly comes from their thoughts and feelings. Right? Where else is it going to come from, And I go into this in much more detail in the book, and so then what drives thoughts and feelings? I mean, all the thoughts and feelings we have today, we weren't born with them. So where do they come from? Mostly from our experiences. And so if you start to see the logical kind of, it's like one of those little Newton ball toys, where you pull the ball and it knocks the first ball, knocks the second ball, knocks the third ball. experience is what drives business results. And so when we get the experience right, then we get the business result ball going up on the other end. And there's a lot of data to support this. Like you said, in the book, I go into a lot of data that shows the correlations between the companies that have great customer experiences and that have great business results, have great growth, profitability, increase in share price. But even then, that can fall short because someone can say, sure, it worked for Apple, but like they're different. We make, industrial lawnmowers, right? Like, that's different from making, is it really though? You're making equipment, right? You're making, but people can easily create that mindset that says, these examples are different from my business. But first of all, when you help someone understand that there's this logical correlation, of course, how you treat the customer ultimately results in their behavior, and their behavior is really what we're after. Then the other thing that you can do that we do a lot is when we do customer research, we video it and then we curate videos. So, if you don't really believe that your customers are really upset, do they really care about how hard it is to order? If it takes 8 steps instead of 3 steps to order your product, I mean, come on, it still only takes 2 minutes. You can rationalize, are we really going to spend $1 million to take our ordering process from 8 steps down to 5 steps? Come on, it's only a 3-step difference. Okay, let's watch a couple of video clips of customers going through the ordering process and how they start out. It's like what we talked about earlier, that emotional journey. You can, and usually what we do when we set up these videos is we'll show the screen and then we'll show the person's face picture in picture. So we're using like a webcam on the face, and then we're, screen recording using Camtasia or something like that, the screen. And then when we edit it, at some times we'll swap them depending on, what we want the person to focus on. But at a certain point, we really want them to see the person's face. We really want them to see, what are we doing to this person's emotional state? And when you see that, sometimes I've been in those kinds of meetings where after a while, it's what I call the clockwork orange technique. At a certain point, people say, okay, stop. Don't show me any more of those videos. I'll give you the money for the project. And, it doesn't always go quite that easily, but the point is made when they see human response to it and they can empathize with that response instead of just intellectualizing and saying, because in the end, I mentioned that experience creates thoughts and feelings drive behavior, but then that's all true. But which is more important? What do you think is more important, the thoughts or the feelings?
I met Dan Gingus when I first got started in CX, and he has been one of my closest collaborators, my CX mentor and friend in the industry. I'm always excited to speak to Dan. He and I have collaborated multiple times over the years. We have really great chemistry, which I think came across really strong in this episode. It was fun, upbeat, and amazingly insightful. Now, a signature Dan move is to share great stories from brands that are really nailing customer experience. And at one point in this episode, Dan shared a story about how PNC Bank detected and fixed a tiny aspect of their experience that made a huge difference to customers.
Now I have a question. How on earth did PNC find out how much this tiny aspect of the experience was actually affecting their customers' perception?
Well, clearly they listen to my podcast. Is there any other way they would have done that? It's a great question, and I don't know the answer, so I can only hypothesize. But, look, lots of companies collect a lot of feedback, and you and I have talked about this before. I know that you're a humongous fan of NPS, and we could talk about that all day long. Here's the thing, folks. NPS, or customer satisfaction scores, or customer effort scores, or whatever score you're calculating, those are all great. They tell you how you're doing. The problem is they don't tell you why. And so we report our NPS score, and then the next month it goes up, and we all high-five each other, and we all cheer because we're awesome. And then the month after that, it goes down, and we all start to scurry around and look for excuses or rationalizations. It must have been the weather, or maybe it's COVID, or maybe it's something, global warming, whatever. The answer is we have no idea because we're not pairing that quantitative data with anything qualitative. And so listening to what our customers are saying, reading the feedback, consolidating that. And in the book, I talk about this concept of, you'll love this, of combining VOC, which is voice of the customer, with AOC. And I don't mean the Congresswoman from New York. I mean actions of the customer. And so when you're looking at a website, for example, you get the survey feedback and the qualitative feedback that people are giving you, but you also look at how are people using our site? Where are they going? How many pages are they viewing? How long are they staying at them? That data will tell you just as much as the voice of the customer, because that's what's actually happening on the ground. You put those two things together, and now you have a really good view of the customer, and you start to figure out, oh, it looks like they need more than $20 bills, right? Because we can look at this and we can kind of, we can collect, we can analyze and then take action on this data. And there's so many companies that do all this VOC work and they collect all this data. And then you know what they do? They put it into a report. And I could tell you, when I was in corporate America, I got more reports than I could shake a stick at. And I didn't read most of them because I didn't have time. My whole job could have been reading reports. So when somebody just gave me a report, that doesn't do it. We've got to take the data, take the feedback, turn it into an action item, and then pass it forward and say, hey, here's what we're hearing, and here's what we need to do about it. And that's where the magic happens.
And lastly, Leslie Short. Leslie is the author of Expand Your Current Culture and runs DEI Strategy. Her company, the Kavu Group, was created to find new solutions to old and new issues within diversity and inclusion. I was excited when Leslie's profile showed up on my desk because I've been wanting to highlight DEI on this podcast for some time. And one thing that Leslie truly helped me see was how deeply DEI affects a company's customers and their employees.
How often do you encounter people saying, we have to change because it is our responsibility? It's the right thing to do from a moral and ethical standpoint. That there is an injustice being done and we have the power to correct it, so we will, versus the market now understands, our stakeholders understand the importance of this and they're demanding action. Do you see that contrast?
I definitely do. And I like to work with both of those. Those are the companies I want to work with. Because at the end of the day, there's the bottom line of, I understand people are important. And I need to figure out how to do that the best way I can. And everyone's at different stages. So one stage is not any less than the other. Anyone, people say to me, who's your perfect client? Anyone that's willing to do the work, that really wants to have this conversation, that wants to peel back the onion, that comes in and says, okay, what's the low-hanging fruit we can start with? And then how do we keep building this? And so it's important for both sides to come, however they get to it. Let's get here. That's what's important.
So what's some of the foundation, what's some of the building blocks, or like you said, like the low-hanging fruit that when you enter an organization, you're like, you need to start right here. It's not, from what I'm hearing from you, it's not with recruiting. It's with building a culture internally, right? Okay. So lay this out for me here.
So when they say, oh, we want to recruit, and I go, why? Well, because nope. I don't say no. I don't. Nope. And and once they get to see me, they know my face is on Zoom now, and they're like, what did we do? And I said, you haven't taken care of the people that's in-house. How are you bringing new people in when you have people leaving or unhappy within? Let's take a moment and step back. I want to see your handbook. I want to see your vision statement. I want to see your mission statement. I want to know who people report to. I want to know who's the other person that people can report to. And I mean, when something is right and something is wrong. And I started breaking that down. I want to see emails and notices to how you speak to your staff. And see, they look at me like, what's that got to do with DEI? DEI is not an add-on. And that's the thing. Most people thought it was an add-on. It's part of your culture. So I need to see how you run this to understand where we can start. And so while I may be working on doing a session with them on your personal bias, like I'm not a fan for hitting that, that video. They all serve a purpose, but Jane, don't do that to Mary. Mary, stop that with John. John, don't. Come on now. We need, before you even recognize what's wrong, you have to understand what you're bringing to the table, what's in your bag, whether you're a CEO or not. So I break that down to them. What is their added value they're giving to an employee outside of a check? And what's the added values you're looking for from employees outside of getting that check? And when we start breaking those things down and then looking through the handbook on, that's great. Everyone has a handbook. No, let me take that back. Everyone doesn't have a handbook.
You're saying this and I'm like, wow, we just made our handbook like 3 months ago.
A lot of people don't have a handbook. So therefore, I'm like, what's your code of conduct? I get the big eye stare. There's things that we can break down. And even in your handbook, I go, that's great. But let's be honest. You get hired, you get the handbook, you're excited you have a gig, you sign off on everything. You put that thing in a folder, because most of them are electronic now. You put it in a drawer and you don't look at that again.
It's true.
So how do we actually live what we're saying to people as part of our values? We have to bring those values to life. And that's how I start.
So thank you for joining us for this season finale, and thank you for sticking with us all year round. Like I said, season 9 is already in production, and we will be back next year, starting with our 100th episode. We're really excited about it. We've got great guests and great content coming. So make sure you subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen or watch your podcasts, so that you know exactly when episodes are going to drop and you're able to join us for that season premiere next year. Thank you so much. Happy holiday and a happy 2020 from all of us here at Worthix.
That's our show. Thanks for joining us. We hope we've brought you one step closer to leading through empathy. It's our way of making the world a better place, one business at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want to know as soon as we publish a new episode. Voices of CX is brought to you by Worthix. I'm Mary Drummond. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, edited and co-produced by Steve Barry.